Hey, welcome to Wolf's Lodge. I'm Wolf. Okay, we're going to dive right in here. Federal Reserve says 20% inflation. Now, the official numbers that are out is 7.9%. There's a different metric, and I'm going to share, I got a show and tell with you here, just so you know I'm not talking out my hat for one thing, because this really, I had to look this up because I was reading. I was reading a report where the author included that. Said, 20% inflation. And it's like, geez, you got to be kidding me. Now, check this out. This is from the Federal Reserve. Fred is one of their analytical tools online. This is from their website. And right here, February 2022, 19.75% interest. Now, this is federal government data, Federal Reserve report that shows us. You can go look up Fred. You can go work with these analytics if you want to dig into it deeper. So 19.75% interest. Now, this is, as you can see across the top here, this is flexible price consumer price index less food and energy. So think about that. This still doesn't include food and energy, which has spiked a lot more than 20%. And these numbers are for year over year inflation. Why this number is not used, excuse me, this is choking me up. This is just crazy. Why this is not used as the what we call the top line or the headline from the government is because their statistic that they use, they consider to be more predictive of where things are headed in the future. This is considered to be more volatile. So this is a different, so building this number up, the Federal Reserve uses a different a subset of the data that goes into what got published recently that said 7.9%. Now, 7.9% is not great to begin with, right? This is far more realistic. As an entrepreneur, this is likely tracking much better with what you've been experiencing. It's just crazy, crazy, crazy. And I'm looking up something else here that I'm going to share with you in a moment. But the thing is, it's 20% interest rate, right? That means in 3 years, everything's over 70% more expensive. How are you dealing with that? Right? So these are the kind of things that can run a company bankrupt in a big hurry, as you know, right? When you got your expenses rising 20%, holy cow. Over the year, some people may say, non-business people might think, well, 20% increase, that's not that, because everybody has such big profit margins, right? That can eat your profits in a hurry. That can put you into bad situation in a major, major hurry, because what does inflation do? Then it burns money. It burns money like crazy. I got something I was going to share. I'm not going to do this. There's a photograph of burning money. Here's the thing. It's the reality, right? So we've got inflation. The Federal Reserve's already announced they're going to raise interest rates to in part and actually to do it faster than they had intended. We expected, and they had already announced there'd be at least 2 rate raises this year. And now they've announced that likely in March sometime they're going to start, which is earlier, and that there will be more than that. They're going to use that as a tool. Inflation rates is a Federal Reserve tool to get a handle on inflation, which is spinning out of control. Right? Spinning out of control. 20% in, not including your gas and food, which has gone up a lot more, and that's been going up. It's not in the recent numbers. So in the like the 7.9% rate, inflation rate that was released as the official inflation rate per the federal government, that only included 4 days of this whole nonsense in Ukraine that really started to spike fuel prices even worse than they already were. So we haven't even seen the effect of that in the overall economy yet, and won't for the next, that will get priced in everything else over the next 30 to 90 days or a little bit longer even. It comes back to, what do you do? How do you respond to that? And I want to thank Victoria. Thank you for sharing. Thanks so much for being part of this. We appreciate you being part of the conversation. But again, how do you respond to this? What do you do? Right? So there are a few things to do. Consider this. Apple Computer started in the 1970s, right? 1976 to be, it was when it started. 1977, you had the first Apple computer out. Inflation was high in the 70s. It ranged between, and it was volatile. It was all over the map. So even in 1977, when it started, when they launched the personal computers, 7.8% interest rate. Sound familiar? And this is all Fed data. You can go back to their Fred tool and look this up. There's nine is 7.8%. It's like it is now, but they've become an iconic company, right? So use the Apple shift. Victoria, wow, woke up right. This is on entrepreneurs' minds all over the place because it's really. You're very welcome, Victoria. And we're in this together. And this is about how do we thrive in this environment, right? Inflation's high. It's off the charts. Interest rates are going up. The key with the inflation rates is 11 out of the past 12 times that the Federal Reserve raised interest rates to get a handle on inflation, it pushed the economy, the overall economy, into a recession. So guess what? It's not going too far on a limb to say recession's coming. How are you preparing your business for that? We're already almost completely through the first quarter of 2022. What does that mean? That means you're already into the second half of the year from a marketing standpoint, because any changes you make today, you're not going to see a result for until 90 days out. Yeah, I understand there's some exceptions to that. Generally speaking, for businesses, the median is about 90 days. Some are faster. If you're pure digital, that may be far more immediate. For most companies, it's going to be longer than that. It's going to be, again, a median of 90 days, maybe even longer. So you're into the second half of the year. First half of the year is gone. So your ability to respond and see it in your bank account in terms of profits, your ability to respond to what's happening right now today, you won't see that money in your bank account, that profit in your business until second quarter, right? So it's March, April, May, June. So you're talking July. You won't be seeing that until July. And interest is rip roaring, burning that money away right now. How do you respond to that? What do you do? Well, here's a couple quick tips. Don't have any fancy graphics for you. You're going to keep this crisp. This is going to be an ongoing topic. The Apple shift, how Apple became an iconic company that it is today. Like them or not, it's brilliant. They have a brilliant history, starting with launching in the middle of a cruddy, volatile marketplace and economy like we have today. So hold that thought. So think about it as CEO and entrepreneur, the leader of your company. You need to focus on people, processes, and data, right? Your KPIs or key performance indicators. So with people, when you've got this kind of environment going, you need to communicate to them clearly, openly, and frequently about the reality of what's going on, right? 20% inflation. If you want to use the 7.9%, that's the official number, go ahead. That's still burning up your profit. How long can you take that kind of increase without it having a increase in expenses, without having it damage your company? How can you take that kind of increase in interest rates that's coming, so your cost of money, your cost of doing business, your interest rates are going to be going up throughout the rest of the year as the Fed begins to increase interest rates. Likely your market is going to shrink as we roll into a recession. If we roll into a recession, fine. I may be wrong on that. I don't like making predictions, but this is the scenario you need to plan for going into inflation. Victoria, it bothered me that people were talking about right. What does it mean for local communities? There's a lot more that affects homes, that affects being able to help people that are in need. So the people that are in the most tenuous circumstances, the one that get hit the hardest, right? It affects small business owners. What are the typical profit margins? A lot of times we hear people talk about profits like 8, 10, 20% increase in interest in expenses, plus an increase in the interest on the money that's being borrowed in order to run the business. Most businesses run on some level of debt. Smart use of debt is okay. You got to be careful, and you need to realign in these types of environment. With these circumstances, you need to shift how you're managing your debt, and you need to watch out. I'm getting ahead of myself. This is something I was going to touch on in a minute, but you need to watch out for variable interest rates. If you've got variable interest rates on revolving lines of credit, on credit cards, on home loans, this can really, really cause you a big problem. So again, with people, need to be clear with them on on what the circumstances are, the urgency that creates, and how you need them to work with you to respond to what you're doing, and needs to shift for them. Uh, im- sh- Mindset shift, right? Anything that has to do with money flowing through the business, everybody in your business, everybody on your team needs to be tuned into. We need to not slow down the flow of money. So what does that mean? For example, let me jump ahead to key performance indicators. On your key performance indicators, what's happening to your accounts receivable, right? Are your accounts receivable doing this? They will in inflation, because the people that owe you money are going to want to pay you slower. And each day that it takes you to collect those dollars, that dollar is worth less. So you need to manage that. You need to get cash in the door, keep it in the door. So you need to crunch down the variability on it. What's that range? Is it range from 4 days to 90 days? I've worked with businesses where when we map out what's going on with accounts payable or accounts receivable, they've got money that's outstanding that runs. It looks good on paper because like a median of 45 days. Well, with a healthy cash flow, big profit margin, maybe you can do that. It's not smart money management to begin with, but in these times, you definitely can't do that because 45 days, the money's worth less than it was today, right? At 20% inflation, that's eating that up fast. And yes, I'm going to stick with that number. You saw the chart from Federal Reserve. Here's why I'm sticking with that number. You know, Victoria, it's great. This is what people need to know. It's not just gas prices, it's everything. It affects wages too, right? We've already been seeing pressure as business owners. There's been a lot of pressure for you in hiring people to raise compensation because we've been hearing about the war on talent, the war for talent for a year and a half. That's continuing. That's expected to continue through 2023. So now, as people's lives are becoming more expensive, it's harder for them to pay the bills. It costs them more to get to work. It costs them more to make the sales calls on your sales team. If we're doing things physical, face to face, and just as we finally seem to be out of the Great Lockdown, right? Actually, it was 2 years ago today that the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 to be a global pandemic. So it only took 2 years to flatten the curve for 2 weeks, right? So we're finally moving out of most of the restrictions from that, which means people are doing things more face to face. They're out, they're driving more. Guess what? They're getting crunched on gasoline. They're getting crunched on home heating. It's still wintertime. Fortunately, we live in a mild part of the country here in the Southwest. A lot of people, they're not that fortunate, right? Or it's costing it's a bigger chunk of their bill. How is this affecting your people? They will expect, they will need to maintain, in order to maintain the same lifestyle. They're being affected by that. There's going to be bigger expectation on wages and compensation. So what does that do? More inflation. So it creates this spiral, especially moving into a recessionary cycle in business, right? Your market starts to contract a little bit. It's harder to get sales. The competition heats up. People are wanting to spend less. Customers are getting hit by inflation, so they're wanting to spend less. How do you respond to that? Got to have your people thinking about that. You got to watch the right key performance indicators. Make sure you're getting the money in the door as fast as possible on your KPIs on accounts receivable. Sticking with KPIs, your key performance indicators. What are you doing on fixed costs? You have to be driving fixed costs down. That's a general business 101, right? Business management 101. However, in this environment, you got to look for what are the big risks in tying up money, right? Where have you got inventory tied up? Where have you got, some of the money gets tied up in accounts receivable, but also in-house, where are you getting bottlenecks? So this is part process, part key performance indicators. Before we move on to process from key performance indicators, how does your team, especially your leadership team, get access to the KPIs? What kind of a dashboard do you have set up? What type of system? So people are getting real-time information. So in an inflationary cycle and a recessionary cycle, it's imperative to get real-time data to stay on what is going on so that you can respond. Adaptability is huge. As we saw during the Great Lockdown, there's, the word pivot became big. You have to be able to adapt as things change. Now let's move on to process. And Victoria, thank you for Victoria's still commenting. We're having a sidebar here at the same time, but she's made great points. How is this affecting businesses in general? How's it affecting your suppliers? How's it affecting your customers? How's it affecting your employees? on process, and we talked about money bottlenecks. Where do things slow down and increase the time it takes you to get paid for what you're doing? Uh, I started out in manufacturing environment. Work in process inventory was huge. Finished goods was huge in terms of how much money was tied up in finished goods, because that's just sitting there waiting to be sold. But you can't eat finished goods. You can't pay your mortgage. You can't pay business loans. Can't make payroll on finished goods. Can't make payroll on work in process. We had another term for work in process, right? That's you take, you buy sheet metal, you drop it at receiving dock, right? So you have the market value of that metal. Once you move it into production and start cutting that piece of metal to make something that you sell at the other end, that is worth nothing more than the scrap value of the metal, which is nothing, right? That's pennies on the dollar. So work in process is huge in terms of ties up a lot of money, and you can't recoup the money from work in process. How are you managing that? Where are you looking to minimize that? You got to watch out for that's a part of where the just in time craze came from. As we saw with just in time, though, it has the complication of you still need to manage your reality in supply chain. Victoria, again, how's it affecting right? How's it affecting your neighbors, your parent, your family? So, it comes back to communication. You got to communicate as a leader. You have to communicate 360 degrees around you. So that means with your team, your family, your community, your local community where you live, the community you serve through your business. How's it affecting your suppliers? Because you're going to need them. You have a strong enough relationship with your suppliers. If they have to make a decision on they're going to serve one customer or another because they just don't have enough on hand to be able to serve both, do you have a strong enough relationship to be the one that gets served? Just saying. Yeah, that may sound brutal. That may sound, borderline, whatever you want to call it. That's the reality. Sometimes it's like that. And the business leaders with the strongest relationships win. How are you doing on those relationships? So, Victoria, that is an awesome catch on that. It's a great point. You have to really be on top of that. It is absolutely. It is the truth. It is a truism. We hear a lot about how we're in the relationship economy. And Victoria, you know this. We've talked. I've had a chance to get to know Victoria enough to know that she totally gets the fact that it's all about relationships, and it has always been about relationships. We aren't in the relationship economy. Business has always been about relationships, right? Especially in the entrepreneurial ranks. Big companies can get away with bad customer service, making huge mistakes, going through cycles where they really have product quality, even product safety problems, as we've seen with some, domestic automotive companies that may have had well, let's leave it at that. We've seen that. We've seen the headlines on that. They've could survive that, but with a small business, man, if everybody goes, wow, what a jerk, I hate that. But guess what? They're looking for a reason to do business with somebody else. In, in the small business arena, in entrepreneurial ranks, we don't last long like that, right? Without those relationships, we just don't last long. So you got to be working on those. Finishing with process. I promise I was going to keep this short, and we'll wrap it up with this. Third point on process, adapting. You have to be able to adapt processes swiftly to changes in market, changes in financial reality, right? And just as a bonus thought, are you talking to your banks and financial institutions, investors, creditors? You need to see, what are they thinking? What kind of pressures have they got? What covenants do you need to watch out for if you've got business loans or even the mortgage on your house? Just a quick story, and I'll let you go. I was working with a client when I was on a consulting team, and I was running operations part of the project with that client. Our lead consultant that was working with directly with their board of directors called us in for a team meeting and had some disturbing news. The owner of the company, the company had 30 days to find new source of financing for that, because they financed their payroll, and it's a revolving line of credit to use to pay for monthly expenses. Their bank was cutting them off because their owner had violated the covenants in their revolving line of credit by going out and buying. He was buying failed competitors because he wanted their equipment, but he was taking on the debt the financial liability for those companies as well, and that got key ratios that the bank was watching out of whack, and they said, "That's it, no more. You are done. You've got 30 days." Guess what? He had his home mortgage with the same bank, and I was there when his wife arrived because she hadn't known about any of this either. And all of a sudden, it all comes to light, and it was not a happy day on campus when it hit the fan. So we had a series of meetings. We wrapped up. We made sure we got paid, and said, "You know what? We're going to step. We're at this point. We're going to step back." And then we were able to help them find a new source, right? So back to that, the people with the best relationships in the broadest and deepest relationships in business win. We had a relationship with an organization that specialized in financial, financial challenges like that. We were able to help them replace that. And fortunately, the company's still there, but that could have taken the company down, right? Sometimes it can be relatively obscure stuff that causes big problems. So, Victoria, thanks for joining us, being part of the conversation. I really appreciate it because this is 21st century television, right? Live and interactive on multiple social media sites at one time. And Victoria, have an awesome day. You, as you're watching this, have an awesome day. And we want to hear your comments, your thoughts too. This is going to become a regular theme over the next several months. We're going to be doing a tip a day on how to thrive, how to leverage the Apple shift so that you can be one of the companies that thrives in high interest, high inflation, recessionary business cycle. And man, it is just awesome. So so much better than the news. Yeah, wow, especially with you participating, Victoria, you make it a lot better than the news. This is how do we get, how do we make this work? We're all in this together. So thanks for being part of Wolf's Watch. I'm Wolf, and I look forward to seeing you on the trail.